Independence, baby. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sheriff Joe Lapinto, and you are watching the New Orleans Talk Network.
This is Congressman Cedric Richmond, and you're watching the New Orleans Talk Network.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your girl, Dr. Rhonda M Lawson, and I am back with a new episode of Horizons with Meet the World Image Solutions. And as you can see tonight, I have a lot of company in the studio once again. Last week we had the cast of Cheating in the Next Room, but tonight we have some of our most influential voices in the city of New Orleans, and I am so happy and honored to have all of these gentlemen in the studio tonight. And if you are Facebook friends with me, you know why I'm having this show tonight. I've been talking a lot about why we need to get out there and vote. I've been talking about what's been going on in the city. And then last night I posted a comment saying that we had 9 people running for Secretary of State. And my question was, do you know who those people are? And do you understand what the role of the Secretary of State is? And I got into a healthy debate with a good Republican friend of mine, which was very interesting. So I'm going to let y'all go to my page and take a look at that. But we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to be talking about some of the amendments that we're going to be voting on. And for me, the amendments were very important to me because a lot of times we focus so much on who's running that when we get to the amendments, we don't think about them until we get into the ballot box per se. And then we don't feel like reading all of that, and so we just scan it real quick, and then we just hit yes, no, and then we leave. And then we wonder why we have some certain laws in place because we didn't take time to actually read over the amendments.
I've heard even people try tic-tac-toe. I've heard it all.
That is so sad. We've got to stop doing that to ourselves. But I think the key to that is actually reading up on the amendments before we go to vote. You think?
Yes.
But how do we do that, though? I mean, if we don't really understand what they all mean, I know there have been a lot of commercials about Amendment Number 2, and there have been a lot of commercials about the fantasy football, and we'll talk a little bit about both of those.
Well, I think you're doing that now. I mean, it has to be a public debate. You know, we don't have what we used to have in our community, where you sat around the dinner table and listened to your parents or engaged in family conversation. So it has to be shows like yours, shows like mine, public venues, organizations. And I think what we're seeing now, given the fact that public policy and laws affect so much of our lives, and people are feeling the effects of.
Yes.
And I think people are starting to say, hey, hold on a second, it's more than just about an individual to vote for. It's about these issues and these amendments and these changes, these constitutional changes,
Yes.
charter changes that are on a lot of ballots. So I think what you're seeing right now is people engage around a lot of these issues because there's more public awareness.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are not familiar, this is Mr. Oliver O.T. Thomas. He is the host of WBOK's The Good Morning Show and also a former councilman.
Yeah, former councilman. I work for a Stewart Consulting Engineering firm. I do messaging and for different companies and candidates want me to write issues for them, leadership coaching, and I just landed a role in a major film series. So
yes,
a little bit of that too.
But I won't call you your name. I'm gonna leave that alone.
No, well, you got to sign non-disclosure at least
yes.
until when you SAG, when you get a role in the film or before it comes out. You really can't talk about it if you want to get paid.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I've done a little background work myself, and it is so hard not to post those pictures or do anything that has to do with that role, so I do understand. Now, also in the studio, we have Mr. Don Francis, my fellow 1991 John F. Kennedy Cougar. I want to thank you for being here, and you are not a politician, but the reason why I wanted to have you on the show is because you do so much work in the city behind the scenes, and you are so in tap with what's going on in the community. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason why I wanted to have you here tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, and just to piggyback off of Mr. Thomas, I think people are experiencing election fatigue. And I heard that word and it stuck with me that, more than ever we need to be at the table, and sharing, like Mama, Big Mama and Big Papa, we would sit down and talk about what was going on in the community. And so just getting back to some of those grassroots and just listening
yes.
and being active. And so, this is all a new environment, but to be here is exciting because it has made me study the amendments and be at the table and have these conversations in churches or at the ball games.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, on this side of the room, we have Parish Council President candidate, Mr. Burgard Turner.
Right. And it's an honor to be here, so thank you very much.
And thank you for being here.
Running for Parish President in Plaquemines Parish. And I agree that there's an apathy concerning voting on the issues other than the candidates. And so what happens in my area, being that it's a small parish, a lot of times, especially in my district, a lot of the locals, the residents, they will give me a call and say, okay, they expect me to educate them on the issues. And that's a good thing, that they can look to leadership for guidance. And I can tell you, New Orleans being so close and just having such an influx of knowledge and a wealth of knowledge, it's important for me to hear what's going on in the city because you have such a variety of opinions and positions on different issues. It broadens my knowledge and it allows me to make a more informed decision. So you all are a tremendous help to me.
Well, I'm glad that we can be a help to you. Now, one thing that you mentioned, you said that people many times will call you and ask you for guidance or ask you for your advice on certain issues. Even though I know that you're a fair man, but do you think that sometimes we depend too much on our political leaders, so to speak, to give us that advice? Because what if, like for instance, I call up to Steve Scalise's office and say, what do you think about this? He's going to tell me from his perspective what I should think about this, and then I'll call you, and then you'll tell me what from your perspective. But neither one of you know exactly what my best interests are at the time. Do you think so? How should
I agree with what you're saying. And again, that's where the apathy comes in. They're not really concerned about it, but because they're going into the booth and they should be concerned about it, at the last minute they call and they want someone to say, here's what you should do. Because it's not a big interest for them. And yet there needs to be a huge interest there. And so, because people can be misled and taken advantage of, and it's just as you've stated, it all depends on who you're getting the information from. That's why we have to be careful who we listen to.
Yes. We have to understand who really has our best interests or our community's interests at heart.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now, last but certainly not least, we have former state senator Mr. Derek Shepherd. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Anytime we can have an opportunity to educate the public about voting and encouraging those to come to the poll, you can count me in.
That's what I'm talking about. Now, let's talk a little bit about, and I mentioned a little bit earlier, and I don't want to necessarily talk about the people who are running, but I think it's indicative of a situation that we have here in New Orleans. We have 9 people who are running for state secretary of state. Now, that's going to be difficult. So what I've seen is some people are going to look down and say, okay, well, who's a Democrat? Okay, there are 3 Democrats, so I'll rule out these other 6. Okay, now who's black? Okay, this is the person I'm going to vote for. And now, is there a danger in doing something like that? Because we really don't know what this person is, how this person is going to vote, if this person is going to take care of us. We don't exactly know what the role is. We just want to put somebody black into office.
There's a potential danger in voting, period, if you make the wrong choice. So, I mean, whatever system people use, you at least want to have some background information on who the candidates are. So everybody has a system. It's just like some people eeny, meeny, miny, mo on a lot of issues. There are people who have, they vote for gender, they vote for race, they vote for political party. They vote for religious affiliations. Some people vote against who they know. I have some people that if you are incumbent, they're voting against incumbents. You have some people who only vote for incumbents. So whatever system you use is fine. But it's important that you make an informed decision. But what you have to understand is that very few people participate in the electoral process anyway. And most political parties and most political groups, they have followings. It's like teams. So to have 9 people running for Secretary of State, folk know very little about any of them. I talked about on my show this morning. So it's a very important election. Whoever the Secretary of State is going to control statewide election process. And we ought to be more informed, but that's the responsibility of elected officials. That's the responsibility of people like you who vote shows, and it's the responsibility of the party. I believe that the Democratic Party should have been more engaged and informed in educating people, especially on important positions like this. All voter information or voter education. I don't expect Republicans to do anything to engage more voters.
Right.
So I expect it from organizations, and I expect it from the Democratic Party.
Now, another thing, I think one of the ways that we can get to know who these people are is to go to the debates, go to the rallies that they may have, but sometimes we don't hear about them until they're over. So where do we go to get this information? How do we find out if there's going to be a debate or a discussion or anything that's going to help us to get to know candidates better?
Well, I can tell you in Plaquemines, if it's coming to Plaquemines, then everybody's going to know about it. Just because of the way we are situated. But the problem is they don't come to Plaquemines. It's rare that they will show up in Plaquemines unless there's a connection already there for them. And so it's a matter of finding out what's going on in the region, in the New Orleans area, and a lot of times we have to pick it up in the wind because there's not a push to the smaller parishes, at least Plaquemines, to feed us the information, and that's what's lacking.
And that's interesting because there are a lot of small parishes in Louisiana. So it sounds like if you're in a smaller parish, you may not always get the information.
That's correct.
Or if you're in a smaller neighborhood, maybe sometimes you may not. You may be in a bigger city, but a smaller neighborhood.
So what ends up happening is the incumbent has the advantage because he's already in, but the newcomers, they're going after the larger populations, and so it's oftentimes difficult for them to get to the smaller areas, and that puts them at a disadvantage and the people at a disadvantage.
Now, so now you've of course you've campaigned before and you won. You've campaigned before and you won. What are some of the things that you did to reach some of those smaller segments?
The very first thing, and I'm sure OT would agree with this, is I had a game plan before I even said I was going to run. And a lot of that, and I know the show is more about voting and getting out to vote for this election. But the primary issue I've always had with candidates who want to run and want to represent the people is when you run for office, and you're going through this right now, when you run for office, you're running on the hopes and dreams of not just yourself, but a whole lot of people who support you. So before you take that task on, have it in your mind a game plan of how I'm going to be successful. And if you can't achieve that, and not talking about waiting for lightning to strike in the bottle, but if you can't achieve that, then don't do it. Don't set yourself up for disappointment or others whom are following you, whom invested in you. So don't do that. So when it comes down to voter turnout and getting people to come out and vote, then I put it up on the candidate, number one, and then on as well as the voters to educate themselves to come out and vote. But you have to give them a reason and give them a message and educate. You don't take anything for granted. Don't assume anything. Get out there and get your message. And that requires resources, that requires vision, but it also requires the type of leadership that you're going to show us when you're in office, hopefully.
There are a lot of different avenues you can use. Print, people have their pamphlet, their flyers, they mail them out, they door knock. Television, radio. As a candidate, you're invited to a lot of different forums and settings, debates. You have the number one thing you have, and the cheapest thing you have, shoe leather. You walk, you meet as many.
Get out and walk.
You go to churches. You knock on doors. You have a chronic voter list or a voter list. Look, it's we live in an age where it's easy for people to say they don't know, but the ability to know is greater today than it's ever been.
Yes.
So it's so many people are conditioned not to go out of their way, and that's why one of the reasons why incumbents have an advantage is that they're in the mainstream media, they're there, they're usually in front of the camera or a mic, or if you're in the parish mails out agenda items or issues. If you're in the city, they do the same. They post stuff. I have elected officials that come to update the public on my show. So if you're not an incumbent, I always tell young folk, it's not what you know or who you know, it's who knows you.
Yes.
Right? So if you're not an incumbent, it ain't what you know or who you know. You got to get people to know you. Right. So, I'll never forget, I didn't sleep. I sit on the corner in the rain. My last 3 elections were 90, 80, and 78%. I got 12,000 more votes than the mayor every time I ran. And it wasn't always just about money. It was just that, I don't drink, but I was at the bar talking to one drunk dude sometimes at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
I went to as many mega big churches we had. I went to all the little churches that just had 10, 20, 100, a couple hundred members, because there's more of them than the big churches. And I made myself available to people to talk to them about issues and knocking on doors. I canvassed a district twice once, a whole council district.
But that's also rare today. What kind of leader he was when he was in office.
He was a leader for the people.
When he was in office.
That is our signal that we need to take a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to just keep diving into this. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why it's so important. And we're also going to dive into the amendments. So if you would like to call in, the number is 563-999-1808. Or you can just comment under the YouTube or the Facebook video, and we will address all of your questions, your comments, and your concerns. So we'll be right back. But while we're gone, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll be right back. What's up, y'all? It's your girl, Dr. Rhonda M Lawson. And can you believe that it has been 1 year since Horizons with Meet the World Image Solutions hit your airwaves? We have interviewed authors, entrepreneurs, playwrights, musicians, and everyone in between, all to bring you the best in literary conversation. And we plan to do it again this year, but only better. So join us right here in the Literary Lounge each Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, right here on the New Orleans Talk Network. See you there. And we're back. We are in the studio with Mr. Don Francis, Mr. Oliver O.T. Thomas, Mr. Gergard Turner, and Mr. Derek Shepard. And we are talking about why it's so important to get out and vote in this upcoming election. Why is it so important to vote in this upcoming election? And that question's for anybody.
Well, I'll go first.
Okay.
You know what? I think that with our election of our new president, with also the transition of Barack Obama, I think people are, they really are looking at our system, the changes in our system, and how the impact of one man with his dialogue is impacting the world, not just. And so on a national stage or international stage, I've really been looking for vanguards to step up, and not as in opposition, but different voices at the table. And so I'm left now to say that we have to actually go to the table, the masses of people. And I think people are beginning to galvanize and step forward, people who were quiet. I definitely see the female movement more present. And so I think people value their vote more ever since a major election such as president. But it really shocks me because we were at 31% for the mayor's race, less than 32%. I don't know. Did anybody know? Am I close? Yeah. And so I think it's our job to do, as Oliver said earlier, to make that conversation really impactful in the community now, to say, hey, this is your opportunity, even though whether it's midterm or major, to step forward and have your voice be heard.
I mean, why should people vote? It's simple. Your livelihood, your social standing, and your life is at stake. And if it's not just yours, it's your business, it's your family, it's your community. So, I'm always amazed when I talk to people and they say, well, I don't fool with politics. Well, politics fool with you. Right. So that's right. I'm a fool with something. If it fool with me, I'm a fool with it. But on the flip side, it's not good enough just to tell people to vote or encourage them to vote. That doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And I think too often the system that abandoned the voter is now surprised why folk are not engaged. Well, that's where leadership comes in. That's where voter education comes in. That's why, and I think too often folk just want to tell people what to vote for, who to vote for. They don't want to explain it to them. Meet them where they are. Explain it to them, have conversations with them, encourage them, and accept their pushback if they say they don't like politics or they don't want to vote. But folk are not willing to go through that. Well, we got to go through that again.
Yes.
It's a lot deeper process than just telling folk to vote, because people have voted and they haven't seen anything benefit them, their business, or their family.
And I think that's a big one. And that's why people have given up. It's like, I'm voting and I'm not seeing any change. So, I mean, how do we encourage them?
Well, in Plaquemines Parish, again, because we're so small, it really matters. And it not only matters, it counts. We've had, in the last election, one council person lost by 12 votes. Wow. Another council person lost by 17 votes. Wow. And many, many years ago, the lady who would have been the first black representative on the school board in Plaquemines Parish, she lost by 9 votes. Wow. Wow. And that was due to gerrymandering. Right? They moved the boundary out of a black community.
And that's why people need to vote.
They shifted. Right. You have to vote because it counts and it matters.
Now let's talk about we hear gerrymandering. I don't know if everybody is really familiar with the term, but it's a very real aspect when it comes to voting and voter tampering.
Yes.
We are currently, everyone listening and looking, we are governed by the majority of the minority. If you think about it.
Yes.
32% of the people in New Orleans said who the mayor is going to be, over 100% of the people in New Orleans. And it's because of the apathy of the thoughts. So many times we would go through the history of why you should vote because of our ancestors and the denial. But like OT says, that doesn't work. And I think it doesn't work for various reasons. But the fact that it doesn't work requires candidates like this good brother here and others to reach people and explain to them that just in a general sense how it affects their lives. You know, this current race right now, if you don't think it matters, just go to Mr. FICA. Mr. FICA is on a ballot right now.
Yes.
That FICA on your check is on the ballot right now. The federal in New Orleans, you have judges whom impact your lives, clerk of courts whom deal with you when you seek justice. That's on the ballot. In Plaquemines Parish, you have a parish presidency that's on the ballot. This person determines the direction of the parish, whether or not they're going to fight for the ferry to be on this time, on this side, doing this. Fights for Jefferson Parish. We have school board members. All of this affects your lives.
There's a lot on the ballot if you really think about it. Small businesses are on the ballot.
Yeah, but I think Senator Shepherd's approach is the right one today because we're just focusing on candidates of bigger issues, right? Their millages, the taxes, their boards, their commissions. And what I think the system has done, the system has been absent in making people understand that it's not just about a personality to vote for.
Exactly.
You need to engage because these other issues affect your bottom line, both financially and socially. You know, in the state and in New Orleans, there's several millages, the tax proposals, right, that are put forward. Well, hold on a second. What that means is that's coming out of your property tax. Right. It's coming out of your pocket. You know, the state, you know, so.
And that's actually one of the amendments right now, that taxes are going to be a big part of it, property taxes as they pertain to senior citizens.
Right, yeah. So, but to explain those issues are important. A long time ago, you know, when I grew up in this process of voter education, that there was a relationship between the elected class, the political class, political organizations, and the community. It's distant now. You know, I tell folk whenever I lecture politically at schools or talk to groups, I tell folk at some point we're going to need a passport to go to D.C. Well, that's how far away our federal government has moved. Well, state houses have done the same, and you see local town halls have done the same. When you have a few people that control the political process, they're not interested in getting more participation, because they know how to campaign, they know how to image, and they know the issues that can affect the few. The danger there is when they see the 60% who've opted out, you know, or the 70% or the 65% who've opted out. The political system as it functions today doesn't want maximum participation. They want limited, targeted participation.
Right.
Is that where gerrymandering comes into play?
Well, gerrymandering, and the Senate knows more about gerrymandering than most people because of his job in the Senate where the lines are drawn. Yeah, and all elected officials are complicit there, African American, white, Republican, Democrat, because they draw the lines to protect their interests. They don't draw the lines to increase participation and draw fair boundaries.
Yes.
One of the things, and if I could segue into one of the amendments, and one of my main reasons for coming on the show was to talk about Amendment Number 1.
Yes.
And I wanted, you know, OT and Don to talk about Amendment Number 2 and anything else they want to talk about. But I want to stress, if you want to talk about how this campaign affects you, think about Amendment Number 1.
Yes.
And I know Amendment Number 2 is big, but Amendment Number 1 is obviously personal to me. The Secretary of the Senate called it the Derek Shepard Amendment, and I understand. But the history of it is that I challenged the law when it was in effect for 15 years, and the Supreme Court on a 6-1 vote overturned it Now we have no restrictions. And what do we mean? We are in the business of second chances. Yes or no? If you are, what does that mean? That means your uncle, your brother, your cousin, your father, whomever, somebody who has done something and they've paid their debt to society and they're re-entering the work programs, the workforce, and they want to be accepted as an equal citizen.
Yes.
Right now, there's no restrictions on it because of some of the fight that people have gone through. And Oliver has hosted so many people to fight this fight, and we got that law overturned. There's an insidious sentence in this, and it says that do you support a person being prohibited from not only elective office, but an office of public trust? That broad definition of an office of public trust. What does that mean? Does that mean that I can't be a coach at a playground?
Right.
So you're prohibiting me from coming back into the community for 5 years. Now that affects everyone. Mm-hmm. So that's a reason enough to get out and participate and vote.
Absolutely.
Just on that. That's a hidden language.
Well, I'm telling people vote no.
Yes, I'll tell them no.
On Amendment 1, and I challenged someone on my show early because it's sexy for everyone to deal with Amendment 2 right now because everybody's on board with it. But Amendment number 1 is one of the most disrespectful because what it says is that, once a person's paid their debt to society, a legislator, an elected official, is going to determine whether they think that's enough debt to
Right. So basically, you're out of jail, you're out of prison, and they want to punish you even more.
So at some point, what we have to say is, hey, look, if we really have faith in the public, let the public decide who wants to represent them and who they don't want to represent them. But the political system, the way it's constructed now, is that the relationships between those in office and the citizens are so weak, they try to use public policy and laws to strengthen their weak positions.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
And think about that.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are not familiar with Amendment number 1, basically it is saying that if a person has gone to prison and they are no longer in prison and they want to run for public office, this amendment wants them to wait 5 years before they're eligible to run. It used to be that they could not run for 15 years.
And that was unconstitutional. Senator Shepard beat that law.
And keep in mind also, not just run for office. A lot of those, like Oliver just said, those who have weak arguments point to one little sentence and says, look at that. No. Not only elected office, but hold the office of public trust. That could be anything involving taxpayers' dollars, anything involving somebody overseeing.
That could be dog catcher if it's a public office.
It could be garbage man.
All right.
It could be, it's insidious like the 13th Amendment, saying that you're free unless you get convicted, then you're really not free. So it's just stuff like that. So when you say, does it affect your life? Yes, it affects your life. I can't think of a way, because we all know someone who's made a mistake.
Yes.
Who's paid their debt, who wants to come home, and I just want to get a job. I just want to provide for my family. So can I go work at Sewage and Water Board? Well, I don't know. It's an office of public trust, so we've got to let somebody else decide that for us.
Yes.
Who knows? So no, I encourage you, just like Oliver said, vote no, but you have to come out and vote. Don't let others decide your fate.
And I also see it as that person, there are so many wrongly convicted people in prison right now. What if that person goes to prison, they've read up on the law, they've seen what happened to them, and they don't want that to happen to anybody else, so they decide to run for office, or some type of career that has that public trust. But now we're saying that they can't do it for 5 years, so they've already been wrongly convicted, and now they're being punished even more.
Because the minority who is in control because of this lack of participation on our part are allowing themselves to minimize whom they have to face.
Yes.
Whom they have to answer to. I really don't have to answer to everyone. I just have to answer to 50.1% of the 32% who voted for me.
Well, my mother used to say a long time ago, she taught us that, beware of the person that shines their own halo. but for the grace of God, there go I. Judge not, lest ye be judged. But the beast is never sated. The beast wants to eat until it eats everybody and everything and every resource we have. And I coined a phrase several years ago called democracy by subtraction. And many of the people in office now, no matter what a party or affiliation, they're trying to bring this country to democracy by subtraction, where as small a representative group as possible runs the mainstream and runs the majority. That's a dangerous way to go, but they don't care because they want total control.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I believe that we have the current president, because there were so many Republicans who did not support him, but when they realized that he was their last choice or their last hope to have a Republican in office, everybody got behind him. They didn't care who he was as long as he was a Republican.
Well, parties matter to some people. I'm a registered independent. And to me that was by choice. You have to work for my vote.
Yes.
No one gets it automatically. I think the Democratic Party, nothing against folk, I probably vote Democratic 90% of the time. But after I went through what I went through,
yes,
and I saw in many cases that the Democratic Party takes you for granted. The Republican Party doesn't take you at all. So, then I figured I would be best being, for me, looking at the issues, weighing the issues. There's some Republican issues that are important. There's some Democratic issues that are important. Look, the political system, if it's not going to implode, then citizens have to rework what they want inside their brains and start to vote accordingly.
Amen. Now, let's segue over to Amendment Number 2. And Amendment Number 2, and it's already on the screen, is the unanimous jury. Louisiana is one of the last remaining states where somebody can be sentenced to life in prison, and the jury is not unanimous. As long as there's 10 to 2, that person can go to jail for life.
I tell people it's just not the unanimous. It's not just the life imprisonment. It's every conviction. A conviction on your record is a conviction on your record.
Yes.
Shouldn't everyone who your peers who sit before the jury pool have to agree that you did this without a reasonable doubt in their mind? Again, it goes to what Oliver said, is narrowing the field of potential people whom I have to deal with. So the DA does not prep his case or accept the case knowing that he can get a unanimous decision. He takes the case down, I can get 10. So when we're picking the jury, which is a whole different conversation, I just need 2 people whom looks at me funny, and I'm fine with that. It's a lack of homework, it's a lack of preparation, but to me it's more than anything, it's a lack of caring about another human being's life.
Yes. Somebody last night, I mentioned earlier that I went to see the documentary Guilty Until Proven Guilty. After the movie, a young lady stood up and said, "What can we do to support you?" And the public defender, Mr. Snowden, said, "Volunteer for jury duty." And that's something that a lot of us try to duck out of. We say, "Oh, I don't want to go to jury duty. I don't want to take that time. I don't want to go sit in there." But if we really think about it, if we volunteer for jury duty, then we are actually directly affecting somebody's life.
In reading about this amendment, I had to go back to the origins. And so what took me, you kind of said it in the premise, 2 things. Why are there only 2 states left with this law still current? And 2, when I looked at the origins, it was connected to Jim Crow laws, and so that was
black codes.
That was a real eye-opening for me in this education process of just being awakened that this is intentional, and so really trying to re-educate myself, because Brother Oliver said it earlier, there's a disconnect on the political platform and the community platform where we have to have those conversations more about what is the origin, and because I'm dealing with little brothers every day who are being arrested, and we're having conversation with judges, and when I meet with the 6th juvenile justice, what comes up is that they say we cannot arrest our way out of this. We have to find some other ways to support our young people, because this isn't working when we have more people incarcerated than in Saudi Arabia and Middle Eastern countries, Japan. And so when I find out the connection of why New Orleans has the highest rate of incarceration in the world, then I can connect it to Amendment 2. And so going out to vote, your first question, this is a reason and alone. And yes, it is sexy, Oliver, the topic, but it's eye-opening, and it's really fearful for, I fear for my son to be up against something like this.
Well, the laws that support the criminal justice system and too many municipal and civil laws, whether minor felonies, were not created to protect, give justice to poor people, people of color, black folk more particular. So when you talk about Jim Crow, black codes, when you talk about state constitutional conventions, where Jim Crow laws were adopted after the Emancipation Proclamation, those laws were adopted, especially in the South. You draw a line along the Mason-Dixon line, the rules were very different in the South, especially when you talk about the prison population and what it was used for and what it was used to maintain. It was used to maintain Jim Crow. It was used to maintain the vestiges of slavery
and
the vestiges of racism. And it's still being used that way because the prison industrial complex is about products. It's about using cheap labor, and it's about ACA, the American Corrections Association. It's about business, and in companies that are investing in it right now.
Privatized prisons.
It had nothing to do with tough on crime. I saw as much dope and corruption inside a prison than I ever saw growing up in the Lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans, and that's real.
Well, we're going to have to take another quick break, but when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about Amendments 3 and 4, and then we're going to just keep diving right in here. So remember, if you would like to be a part of the conversation, you can comment under the Facebook or the YouTube videos, or you can contact us at 563-999-1808. We will be right back. Don't go anywhere, and while you're gone, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I'm Dr. Rhonda Lawson. This is Horizons with Meet the World Image Solutions, and we'll be right back. What's up, y'all? It's your girl, Dr. Rhonda M Lawson. And can you believe that it has been 1 year since Horizons with Meet the World Image Solutions hit your airwaves? We have interviewed authors, entrepreneurs, playwrights, musicians, and everyone in between, all to bring you the best in literary conversation. And we plan to do it again this year, but only better. So join us right here in the Literary Lounge each Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, right here on the New Orleans Talk Network. See you there.
Happy Merry Mondays. It's your girl, Mary J. I want you to tune in with me to Real Talk with Mary J on New Orleans Talk Network every Monday morning at 10 a.m. Then follow me to blogtalkradio.com/Real Talk with Mary J at 10 p.m. It's going to be a Merry Monday every Monday at 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. You've just tuned into New Orleans Talk Network.
Well, what's up, everybody?
And we're back. This is your girl, Dr. Rhonda M Lawson, and I am in the studio with 4 distinguished gentlemen, and we are talking about why it's so important to get out there and vote. So we were just about to talk about Amendment number 3, which is the permit donations for political subdivisions. Basically, they're saying that it should be okay for one...
for municipalities to barter or use equipment. But right now, you can't do it, right? Let's say that I'm in Orleans Parish, and there's some equipment or something of value from Jefferson Parish or Plaquemine. Then it's illegal for you to provide that equipment or to give it or donate it to another subdivision or another parish. This cleans that up. I think it allows for more collaboration. It allows for potentially for communities to start working together and managing and leveraging resources. Yeah, it's a definitely outdated law.
Now, my question is, let's say we vote yes on this. Is every parish or every municipality voting that same way, or is everybody voting on something like this?
We are same amendments.
Okay.
Yes, say statewide.
Okay.
It's a statewide referendum.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that one was statewide, because the only one I saw
All
there
six,
that said it was
all
state.
6 are statewide.
Okay.
Statewide
All
referendum.
6.
Okay.
I would imagine that's big for Plaquemines to exchange equipment.
Extremely big, and because we have the port as a subdivision, but then we also have just working in the region, as Oliver was saying, being able to work together and create some synergies. There are resources that exist in Orleans that we don't have, but it would promote a working together.
Right.
And that makes us all better.
Several years ago, if you remember, I did the first ever joint council meetings with Jefferson Parish and Orleans. We had a couple of them. And the hope was that I wasn't looking for regional governance, but I was looking for regional cooperation. And at some point, think if we could bid a regional contract, or joint parish contracts, how much money you would save, how much cheaper, how much more efficient it would be. You know, where we weren't so parochial, or you weren't restricted by these boundaries, where you couldn't go out there and work together, especially when it comes to saving the taxpayers and saving your citizens money. You know, so hopefully at some point we'll see more of this, where you can have cooperative endeavors and cooperative efforts that benefit the voters and the taxpayers.
Do you see a downside to any of this? I don't.
I mean, yeah, if you're taking advantage of, I mean, or if one side is always giving, or they're supporting, and you don't get, it's not reciprocated from the other. But I doubt that anyone would continue to let that happen.
Okay.
But it's the opportunity that's so valuable, which we don't have right now. And so we can't take advantage of what's out there. And I think that's hurting us.
Yes.
At least a small parish.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think
Good point, Virgo.
there's so much parishes, one parish not liking the other parish, or they're challenging each other, and I think this probably could, as you say, clean some of that up.
But you think about if we had real regional transportation,
That would be wonderful.
right? If you had one provider of regional transportation,
Right.
you know, if you had real regional garbage disposal, real regional beautification,
Yeah.
you know, real regional cooperative law enforcement.
That's a big one.
As
That's a
big as
really
law
big one.
enforcement, but you know how many law enforcement agencies you have operating inside Orleans Parish? Levee Board,
Right.
Harbor Police, Sheriff, federal agencies, NOPD. Just suppose all of them had memorandums of understanding or cooperative endeavor agreements where they shared in patrolling our citizens. Well, you know, you got 6 or 7 law enforcement agencies that break the bank, right? Why can't they divide up responsibilities and work together?
Yes.
You would overnight cure the shortage, manpower shortage.
Yeah, the day before night.
Yes.
That's absolutely correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, let's move over to amendment number 4, the Transportation Trust Fund. Can somebody kind of explain that one a little bit?
Well, if I could,
Yeah.
the fuel, what the amendment basically says is that all fuel sales tax will go to transportation needed projects. I can't tell you, I can explain it, the best way I can explain it is like that. If you ever use the Crescent City connection and you see the grass growing out of the grates, which just drives me crazy, They say it's because of a lack of money. Well, you know what? Okay, we're going to take all the dollars directly related to all the transportation projects that are needed around the state. We're not going to use them for the state police to have trips. A lot of this, most of the amendments are based upon specific problems that people see. The previous ones was a specific issue. This one was a specific issue. We need to get more transportation dollars directly to the streets.
Yes.
How do we funnel the remaining dollars without a tax increase? Well, you take the dollars that are coming in and you specify them by taking out some of the fat. Some people would consider some of the state police's fuel costs and fuel transportation, especially the trip that they took to Las Vegas, as fat. So this was a way of doing this. I don't particularly have a problem with it. I like the director of transportation that we have now. I think he's a strong brother who's trying to use the resources that he's got. If this can give him more resources so that we can have cleaner, less bumpy state streets around this, maybe even help some local municipalities, I'm for it. I'm asking people to vote yes. I think it's a benefit.
The I-40 extension, the problem we have with the very dangerous, a lot of dangerous situations that happen with I-12, where that whole ramp, that whole part of the interstate needs to be redeveloped because it's not because it's not safe. Dr. Sean Wilson, who's the head of the DOT, one of the finest, I think, directors they've ever had. The senator is right, but they don't have enough money in that fund to do the capital projects. Capital projects are important. We know now Sewage and Water Board in the city.
That's going to be a big one for a while.
Streets, you have to have. They have to be maintained. They have to be reconstructed. They have to be new. So a portion of the funds have gone to underwrite the state police. Okay, what this amendment says is that those funds that are for transportation are not going to go to state police and other entities anymore. They will go directly into the Department of Transportation to help underwrite and fund more projects. Sean Wilson Dr. Wilson is probably the best I've ever seen at leveraging the resources he has. But he needs more resources because critical infrastructure is falling apart. America's infrastructure is falling apart. Right. President Obama put us on notice, right?
Yes.
So this state now, this is the right thing to do. We need to vote to make sure that money doesn't go to state police. It doesn't go anywhere but back into the transportation fund to leverage more infrastructure public projects, period.
One big project is, and he hinted to it, one big project that's coming along the pipe is we need a flyover ramp from I-10 to this new airport terminal. That money is obviously needed. You need in Plaquemines Parish.
That's the Loyola ramp.
The Loyola ramp. You need ferry money and bridge money. Keep in mind, every ferry in the state is state run, with the exception of maybe one or two. So that's money that's needed. So I just to echo, amen.
Well, we have to move on to, because we only have a few minutes left, but we have amendment number 5, which is to extend eligibility for tax exemptions. And what I was looking at this as is senior citizens who own their home, and they're getting certain tax breaks. If they decide that they want to transfer the ownership of their home to, let's say, their child, but they're still living in the house, those tax breaks should continue.
Yeah, I mean, this amendment is pretty easy, and it's pretty progressive. First of all, we should be doing this anyway.
Yes.
In one of the most difficult states to live in, where citizens are demanded of too much and put up with too much, this is the ability to help those people and help transfer that asset on to extended or other family members. This one's a no-brainer.
Absolutely. And then we also have, okay, there we are, amendment number 6, reappraisal of residential property. So how does that amendment work?
If your property increases by 50% of value, then instead of paying that bill like that, it'll be phased in.
There's a catch-22 here, and I think the policymakers at some point may have to clean that up. Now, I would say, you want to vote for it, but the determination is if it exceeds 50% and you can't pay it, then you have 4 years. You don't have to pay one lump sum.
Right.
But if you can show hardship, But if the person whose taxes increase 20%, 30%, and they have
49%,
and they can show hardship, how do you penalize them because it didn't reach the 50% threshold? So it's a step in the right direction, but I think there's some more work that has to be done by the legislature at some point to make this more just for everybody.
Gotcha. And then the last one, this one has been getting almost as much airtime, if not more, than amendment number 2. Right. This fantasy sports contest. Apparently, people play fantasy sports, but it's not regulated. We don't make any money off of it. So now, if we legalize it, basically, we can start making money off of it.
Well, actually, it is regulated. The fact of the matter is that they can't play fantasy sports.
It's
illegal to play. So it is regulated, and this would allow fantasy sports to be played in Louisiana. To me, this is a personal issue. If you play fantasy sports or you don't mind someone playing fantasy sports, then support it. If you are against fantasy sports or you think it's a gateway to gambling or other issues, on this one, it's a personal decision as far as I'm concerned. As far as what people say, had it been gaming or fantasy sports was going to be building facilities here and employing people, I'm all for that. Then I'll be voting yes without a doubt. But on this particular issue, this is one of the things where the people should vote their conscience and do what they think is best for themselves and their family.
It would be nice if they actually brought some facilities here and created some jobs in the city.
Well, that would be excellent. But I haven't heard any arguments about that. I don't know. Did you hear anything, OT, about?
No, I haven't heard it. I mean, this is kind of this movement around the state to legalize sports betting books, so people can bet on sports, and so states that are having a difficult time can keep some of that revenue. It's a step in that direction. I think what the senator said is it's more of an individual. I don't play fantasy nothing.
I don't either.
I play reality, everything. Right. So, but for folk who like fantasy, I mean, it's an opportunity for them. There are a few companies that control that industry, but I would like to see maybe a headquarters here in the region. I'd like to be able to show how much of that money goes back and what it's dedicated to or where it goes.
Yes.
So, but it's an individual base.
Okay, and unfortunately, we have to end there. This has been such an informative show. I hope you all were able to get something out of this. Remember,
vote.
Vote. Early voting has already started. It started about 2 days ago. And you still have a couple more days to early vote.
October 30th.
Yes, October 30th. And then on November 6th is Election Day. Make sure that you are paying attention to not only who is running, but the okay, I think that's a comment that I can't see. Not only who's running, but look at the positions that they are running for and how they will affect you. It is very important. So let's not let this election go to chance. Let's get out there and vote. Let's actually affect some change in our city, in our state, and ultimately in our country. So that's all I have. I want to thank all of my guests for being on tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank everybody. Really, it's a good important conversation.
Yes. I enjoyed it. Now, don't forget, there are tickets still available for Cheating in the Next Room. There are... Why are you laughing? It's a great play.
You got to get a ticket to Cheating in the Next Room?
You got to get a ticket to the play. I don't know about a ticket to actually cheat. And there are more great events coming up with Meet the World Image Solutions. So check us out on the Meet the World Image Solutions Facebook page, Instagram page, or you can go to www.mtwimagesolutions.com. So once again, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And you guys have a wonderful night. God bless you.
Thank you.
And good luck on your campaign.
Yeah, absolutely, man.